Welcome back to C# 101. Today we are going to talk about the string class. Alright, so let's get started by opening Visual Studio 2019. We're going to use a console app .NET Core. So if you need help finding it, just choose language C#, platform Windows, and project type console. Let's give the project a name and hit create. Alright, some things to note about strings. Strings are a collection of characters, which is a system.char. Strings are an object. Strings are immutable. Read only. To declare a string, you simply type in string, the name of the string, and you can assign it a value on the same line. Let's change this to message. Or you can reassign You can also declare on one line and define on another line. Another thing to note about strings are a reference type that behaves like a value type. There are a lot of things here that you may not really understand yet, but these are definitely good things to keep in mind, and we will touch on reference types, value types, and why strings are immutable in a future video. But for now, just keep these in mind, that strings are a collection of characters, strings are an object, strings are immutable, and strings are reference types that behave like value types. So let's go ahead and write the value of a string to the console. So we're using the system console class and the method writeLine. This is a static method, and that's why I can call it directly from the console class. Let's go ahead and pass it one of our messages and see what happens. So just like in our previous video, we have a message displaying on the console, but unlike the previous video, we are now pulling that message from a variable, from a string variable. Strings also have a lot of built-in methods that we can take advantage of. To find out what these are, you can simply type in a dot after your string. You can do this with both a string literal or a string variable. You can even do this with some sort of method that returns a string, but we'll go into that once we cover methods. So, for example, I can use contains to find out if my string contains something. So let's go into the definition of contains by right-clicking and clicking Go to Definition. You can also quickly get there by hitting F12. Note that the contains method takes in a character and returns a boolean. There's also a version of the contains method that takes a string and returns a boolean. So in our case, let's try a character first. To define a character in C#, you simply use a single quote, type in the character, and another single quote. Let's write this out to the console. So we know that this returns a boolean, which is a true/false value, and this will write to the console if my message contains an H character. And sure enough, I get a true. That's because my message does contain an H. If I were to type in a V, notice that I now get a false. I can also type in a full string. Notice that I replaced the single quote with a double quote. That's because this is a string of characters, not a single character. And again, I get a true. Also note that I can't do something like this. Notice I get a compile error. There are too many characters in a character literal. That means the compiler is expecting a single character in between single quotes. You could also do a replace. If we right-click and go to definition, we can see that replace takes two characters, an old character and a new character. Let's give it a try. H with H. And let's write that directly to the screen. Notice that the first time we display the message, we have a capital H, and the second time we have a lowercase h. This method will not error out if it can't find the character. For example, if I try to replace a V with an H and run it again, I still get the same result of hello world with a capital H. It couldn't find the lowercase v and simply did nothing. One more method that you may find useful is to upper. Let's go into the definition of that method. It doesn't take any parameters and it returns a string. Let's give it a try. Simply wrapping my console write line around the string upper. And just note that all of these work because these all return a string. If we go into the definition of write line, we see that it expects a string value. If we go to the definition of toUpper, we see that it returns a string. We are successfully fulfilling the requirements of the write line method by returning a string into the method itself. Let's go ahead and run. Notice that hello again is now all in capitals. Those are the basics of strings. Again, remember the important aspects of a string. These will come in handy later on in future videos and in your career of C#. Strings are a collection of characters. Strings are an object. Strings are immutable. Strings are a reference type that behaves like a value type. I'll see you next time.